In late August of 1944, in the middle of World War II, life in the small Midwestern town of Mattoon followed a predictable rhythm. Most of the town's men were overseas. The nights were quiet. Windows were left open to let in the summer air. Nothing about the place suggested fear. That changed just after midnight on August 31st. Urban Rafe was asleep in his home on Grant Avenue when he woke to a strange smell drifting through the room. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't natural gas. It was sweet, chemical, and unfamiliar. Within moments, nausea hit him hard. He became weak, then violently ill. As he struggled to sit up, his wife tried to leave the bed to check the kitchen stove, thinking a pilot light might be leaking. She couldn't move her legs. Both of them were fully conscious, fully aware, and unable to stand. By the time the sensation passed, there was no intruder, no sign of forced entry, and no explanation. Later that same night, only a few houses away, a young mother woke to the sound of her child coughing in the darkness. As she tried to reach her daughter, she discovered she was unable to move. Again, there was a smell. Again, paralysis. Again, no evidence left behind. Police logged the incidents, but remained skeptical. Strange odors could come from factories. Illness could be coincidental. Then the reports continued. On the night of September 1st, Aline Kearney was lying in bed at her home on Marshall Avenue when she noticed a strong, sweet scent coming through the open window. At first, she assumed it was flowers outside. The smell intensified. Then she lost feeling in her legs. Panic set in as she realized she couldn't stand. Her sister, Mrs. Reddy, rushed in from another room and immediately noticed the same odor. Tracing it to the open window, she called police. Officers searched the area and found nothing. But around 12:30 a.m., Aline's husband, Bert Kearney, returned home from work. As he approached the house, he noticed a man crouched near one of the windows. When Bert shouted, the man ran. He was tall, thin, dressed in dark clothing, wearing a tight-fitting cap. The description was printed in the newspaper the next morning. By then, the town was paying attention. Over the next several days, similar reports flooded the police department. Homes filled with strange odors. People experienced weakness, nausea, coughing, and temporary paralysis. No one died. No one suffered lasting harm. But fear spread faster than facts. Then, on September 5th, something physical appeared. Carl and Beulah Cordes returned to their home on North 21st Street around 10 p.m. Sitting on their porch was a small white cloth, slightly larger than a handkerchief. Beulah picked it up. The moment she inhaled, she became violently ill. Her face swelled. Her throat burned. She vomited and nearly collapsed, describing the sensation as feeling like an electric shock passing through her body. Nearby, police found a skeleton key on the sidewalk, a used tube of lipstick. No explanation for why either item was there. The cloth was tested. No chemicals were found. That same night, another woman reported seeing someone attempt to enter her bedroom window and gas her as she lay in bed. The town began forming armed patrols. The FBI was contacted. The police chief issued warnings, urging residents to stop roaming the streets with weapons before someone was shot by mistake. By this point, footprints were reported beneath windows. Torn screens were photographed. Shadows were seen moving along houses after dark. And yet, no one was caught. As the days passed, police began to notice something else. False alarms outnumbered real reports. People called in after smelling gasoline, paint, flowers, factory fumes. Some calls came in after someone noticed a shadow that turned out to be a tree branch. On September 12th, authorities made an announcement. They said the incidents were likely explainable occurrences made worse by fear, that anxiety, wartime stress, and suggestion were causing people to misinterpret normal sensations. They said there may never have been a gasser at all. After that statement, the report slowed, almost overnight. One final witness later claimed the attacker was actually a woman dressed as a man. No arrests were ever made. No conclusive evidence was ever found. And to this day, whether the Mad Gasser was a real attacker, a drifting industrial chemical, or a town gripped by shared fear remains unresolved. In January of 2019, 3-year-old Casey Hathaway was visiting family near the small community of Ernle, North Carolina. The area around the home was rural and heavily wooded, with thick brush, briars, and uneven ground extending in every direction. At some point during the afternoon, Casey wandered away from the property. When his family realized he was gone, they began searching the nearby woods themselves. Within minutes, they called authorities. The Craven County Sheriff's Office responded quickly. Deputies, state troopers, and search and rescue teams arrived as daylight faded. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging were brought in. Volunteers spread out in organized lines, calling the child's name and checking ditches, tree lines, and thick undergrowth. That night, temperatures dropped into the 30s. Casey had been wearing light clothing. He had no food, no water, and no shelter. Searchers were especially concerned about hypothermia and the dense, thorny brush that made movement difficult, even for adults. Despite hours of searching, nothing was found. By the next morning, the search expanded. Crews pushed deeper into the woods, widening the perimeter. The terrain grew thicker and more difficult, with tangled briars and low visibility. Still, there were no clear tracks, no discarded clothing, and no sign of where the child might have gone. As the second day passed, concern grew that time was running out. Late that afternoon, nearly 48 hours after Casey disappeared, one of the searchers heard a faint sound coming from a dense patch of brush. When they pushed through the thorns, they found him. Casey was curled up inside a tangle of briars, cold, scratched, and dirty, but he was alive. Paramedics checked him on site. He was dehydrated, but he had no broken bones, no serious injuries, and no signs of an animal attack. Given his age and the conditions, authorities described his survival as remarkable. After he was reunited with his family, Casey began answering questions about where he had been. He spoke calmly. According to relatives and later statements shared publicly, he said he had not been alone. He told them a bear had been with him, not an aggressive animal, not something that chased him. He described it as friendly. He said it stayed nearby and kept him company while he was lost. His aunt later wrote on Facebook that Casey insisted he had hung out with a bear for 2 days, and that he believed the bear helped protect him. The post spread rapidly, drawing national attention. Wildlife experts acknowledged that black bears do live in North Carolina, including in that region, but emphasized that bears generally avoid humans. There was no physical evidence that an animal had touched or guarded the child. Authorities did not confirm the account, but they also did not challenge it. They focused instead on the outcome. Casey had survived nearly 2 winter nights alone in dense woods without serious injury. Some suggested the explanation was psychological, that a frightened child may have interpreted sounds, shadows, or distant movement as something protective. Others saw it as a coping mechanism, a way for a 3-year-old to make sense of isolation and fear. But even without taking the account literally, questions remained. How had Casey avoided wandering onto roads? How had he stayed warm enough to survive the night? And how had he remained in one area long enough to be found? Those 2 days in the woods were never reconstructed in detail. No definitive explanation was offered. What lingered was not the image of a bear, but the fact that a child, barely old enough to speak in full sentences, endured conditions that should have overwhelmed him, and did so without panic, without injury, and without being truly alone, at least in his own understanding. What actually stayed with him in those woods remains unknown. On May 31st, 2014, 3 12-year-old girls spent the day together in the city of Waukesha. They had just finished a sleepover. It was late morning. The weather was mild, and the neighborhood was quiet. Nothing about the day stood out as unusual. After breakfast, they left the house and walked toward a nearby wooded area known as David's Park. The park was familiar to them. It had walking paths, tall grass, and sections where the trees grew close enough together to block out most of the surrounding houses. They told each other they were just going for a walk. As they moved deeper into the park, The paths narrowed and the trees closed in. The sounds of traffic and nearby homes faded until there was only wind in the leaves and the soft crunch of dirt under their shoes. At some point, they decided to play hide and seek. One of the girls, Peyton Isabella Leutner, followed instructions from the other two. She was told to lie down on the ground, to cover herself with sticks and leaves, to stay still so she could hide better. She did exactly what they asked. When she tried to get back up, they were already on her. The attack happened quickly. She was pinned to the ground as the knife came down again and again. The blade was small but sharp. It struck her arms, her legs, and her torso. She didn't understand what was happening, only that it hurt and that she couldn't get away. By the time it stopped, she had been stabbed 19 times. 2 of the wounds reached major organs. One narrowly missed a critical artery. Another passed through her diaphragm and cut into her liver and stomach. When it was over, the other 2 girls stood up. They told her to lie still. They said they were going to get help. Then they walked away. Left alone in the woods, Peyton stayed conscious. She pulled herself forward across the dirt, dragging her body inch by inch through grass and leaves. Blood soaked into the ground behind her. Her vision narrowed, and she stopped trying to focus on anything except moving. Eventually, she reached a road. A cyclist passed by, saw her lying there and stopped. Emergency services were called, and she was rushed to the hospital. Surgeons operated for 6 hours. One doctor later said that if the knife had gone the width of a human hair farther, she would not have survived. She was released from the hospital a week later. 5 hours after the attack, police located the other 2 girls, Anissa Weier and Morgan Geyser, walking near a furniture store along Interstate 94. They were calm. They still had the knife with them. When questioned, they said they were traveling north toward a distant forest where they believed Slender Man lived. They referred to it as the Slender Mansion. They told investigators that the attack had been meant as a sacrifice, something they believed was necessary to prove his existence and keep themselves and their families safe. During interviews, Morgan Geyser described years of hallucinations that had begun in early childhood. She spoke about seeing figures that weren't there, colors melting down walls, and a man she called It, whom she believed followed her, appearing behind her in mirrors or around corners. Psychiatric evaluations later diagnosed her with early-onset childhood schizophrenia. In 2017, both girls were tried as adults. Both were found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect and committed to secure psychiatric facilities. Anissa Weier received a sentence of up to 25 years. Morgan Geyser received the maximum sentence of 40 years. Peyton Leutner returned to school months after the attack. Years later, she said she was recovering and that what happened had inspired her to pursue a career in medicine. The wooded paths of David's Park remain open. The place where it happened looks no different than it did before, and for most of the people who pass through it now, there is nothing there to suggest what once took place beneath the trees. Alright guys, that will be it for today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss next week's upload. I drop new stories every week, so there's always something coming. I'll see you in the next one.